And hey everybody, welcome to the Love and Action Show with me, Alpa Soni, the spiritual badass. Today I am absolutely delighted to have a wonderful guest, Dr. Cristina Ram. She is an extraordinary individual with a magnificent story. But before I hand it over to her, I would actually like to introduce my guest with just all the things that she's accomplished in her life, given her story. She's an internationally sought out after scientific leader, spokesperson, and innovator in health and wellness. She travels the world presenting, lecturing, and educating the private and public sector about the bold new world of nutraceuticals, wellness strategies, and environmental solutions. She also has a master's and doctorate degrees in rehabilitation counseling sciences, psychology, and strategic science, and has conducted postdoctoral studies at Harvard University in bioscience, engineering, and nanobiotechnology. And she's received certificates in nutrition and pharmaceutical management from Cornell University. And lastly, she served in positions like Chief Scientific Officers, Chairman of the Board of Medical Sciences and Clinical Sciences, spokesperson and lab formulator for companies such as Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, DCZ Healthcare, Biogen, IDEC, Alexion, Rain International, and my favorite, Root Wellness. Welcome, Dr. Cristina. That was quite a handful of things to say. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love your name, by the way. I love your real name, and I really like spiritual badass. That's awesome.
Thank you. You have to be in these days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially right now.
You have, I mean, that was just quite an extraordinary list of things that I shared with the audience, but you have quite an extraordinary story as well. So let's begin by sharing your journey with us, please. That'll be amazing.
Well, yeah, thank you. I don't know if I have an amazing journey. But I'll say it's been a very busy life. I always say,
brave journey.
Thank you. I feel like it's been, I've lived multiple lives. That's how I feel, to be honest. And so I had a great life as a kid growing up. I grew up in a small town, but I've said this a lot. We had pesticide all over our town because we were a farming community. And back then it's just how it was. The planes would, fly over you and spray pesticide. And my journey as a kid, I was sick a lot growing up. I was born premature. I had a lot of issues as a little kid. Asthma. My family has a lot of cancer, dementia, a lot of issues as well. And they've been tobacco farmers as well as farmers and educators, but we genetically, had a bunch of issues. I had a great childhood though, and then went to college, worked in the summers in North Carolina. I got Lyme disease when I was about 19 years old. And my roommate from college was actually with me. We were working at a camp and got in a bed of sea ticks. And I felt like we were having so much fun that summer. Think about a group of high school and college students, mostly from the age of 17 to 25, right? Just working together in different areas all summer. It was so much fun. We would camp and do everything. And all of a sudden I had this huge, bullseye. And at the time, back then, no one even understood what that was, but I was very lucky because there was an infectious disease doctor in North Carolina that actually had been one of the first doctors that found Lyme disease and treated Lyme disease. Wow. So when I first went to the doctor, they said I got bit by a brown recluse. I had 104, 105 temperature. I was extremely sick, extremely tired, but I don't know if you remember when you were that age, but when I was that age, I didn't want to stop doing what I was doing. Yeah. So they told me that I would get better. I kept feeling sick, but I kept going. And then to the point that I was in a movie theater one day with a bunch of my friends and my roommate from college, and I blacked out. I fainted. I ended up in the ICU. I don't remember. I remember them in the ambulance asking me, for example, what my name was, but I didn't know my name. I remembered them asking me my parents. I didn't know, and I was confused. How
long was this after the bite that you felt the sick?
I can't remember exactly. It was a couple of weeks when I got that bad. Yeah, it was probably 10 days, I'm thinking. I ignored it at first, like it itched and it burned, but I didn't really understand. And then the bullseye became like red. It got infected even because I kept itching it, scratching at it because it was itching and burning. And I I remember, it's really odd. I remember even now not knowing who I was or remembering anything, like my address I grew up in. I
Wow.
had a photographic memory almost at the time, straight A student. I ended up not knowing what 2 + 2 was. It was
Yeah.
really bizarre. I don't, when people say they don't believe in Lyme disease, I just want to say, listen, there was nothing going wrong in my life when that happened. Do you know what I mean? Like for that to happen, it was weird. It was like my brain was locked, like it was there, but I couldn't find the answers. Right. And I still remember that I ended up in the ICU. They ended up doing spinal taps because of meningitis. Um, they had me packed on ice. I was there for a long time and ended up doing IV transfusions and IV treatments, and every vein in both arms collapsed. So they put a shunt in and
Wow.
lost my hair, lost my eyelashes. It's very interesting. And I really don't want my parents to hear this because they were great parents. But at the time, they were like, what is this? We don't even
Yeah.
know what this is. Did someone make this diagnosis up? Of course, they saw me in the ICU, very sick, of ready to die. And a lot of people I don't think get that sick. I'm not sure why I ended up having such an extreme reaction, but I lost my hair, my eyelashes. I ended up just extremely, extremely ill. And they actually told me I couldn't go to college the next year. My father said I would be going to college and that I would have the best year ever. I cried the whole way to college.
Oh,
I just remember not being able to get out of bed in the morning. But I'll say this, at my age now, I'm very thankful. At the time, I was angry with my parents because I had parents that they really wanted us to succeed at everything. My whole life, we were in everything from ballet to gymnastics to volleyball to speech to music. I mean, everything. And I kept thinking this is not fair, but now I'm very thankful for it because I felt so bad, and I have felt so bad numerous times since then, that it would be easy to give up. Right. And so I didn't give up. I ended up doing a lot of natural things because the traditional treatments that they were giving me were not working. And at that age, I remember this is another great thing about my family. I was brought up in a home where you don't just go to the doctor, right? You find other things that can help as well. Because my mother was part Cherokee and Choctaw, and so I really looked at alternatives and started being very healthy, and was able to recover. Now, I want to say this. When I say I recovered, I'll give you an example. My hair looks much different when it grew back. My everything looks different. Like it was and feels different, but I've gotten over that. It took years to kind of adapt. And I don't think I ever completely adapted until I started taking different forms of zeolites. And then I worked on them as a scientist. And also a thing that I've used for it, because I worked for Pfizer and I worked for pharmaceutical and biotech, I also used a lot of Zithromax and a lot of
right.
fluconazole because I understood the connection between fungus and parasites and
Right.
bacteria and viruses and how they're all connected with the DNA.
Yeah.
And so those tools have worked really well. Like my combination of the pharmaceutical and nutraceutical world selfishly have served me very well to understand how to treat my body. But if I had just had pharmaceutical, for example, I would never have gotten better. I would
No.
just keep treating it. With the nutraceuticals, I'm able to have, as like now I feel finally, after years being on products that I've made, I finally feel like myself again. And that's a long journey. I mean, I ended up having a brain tumor, a spinal tumor, losing a child, multiple, I don't talk about this a lot. I had multiple miscarriages. I even miscarried twins in the second trimester. Their heart stopped beating. And I really do think most of that, I know genetically I'm predisposed to cancer, but I think a lot of that had to do with Lyme disease
Well,
and the
this is why
different
I
ways
said
to my body
at the
down.
start, I think let me rephrase what I meant is that you're amazing and from an inspiring point of view. Just before the show, we were just briefly sharing both our sort of stories, and I was explaining to you about my battle with Lyme's and only discovering it recently. So I really do understand the battles. And for myself, I didn't get any kind of help from the medical industry at all. Nothing. I was just told constantly by friends, family, it's in your head, and then that sort of starts other psychological problems as well. You feel depleted in your soul because your body's hurting all the time. Nobody understands you. So I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2015, but my story is long before then, probably from the age of 7. But I fought it, and I was exceptionally bright child, exceptionally bright. And I just remember my memory went overnight. It felt like it was something that just, crept up on me. I would read 2-3 books a day as a child.
Yeah.
I had so much, so intuitive. And jack of many trades, as they say in the UK. I just was interested in so many things, so it can really rob you of your life. And that's why it's extraordinary, with just what you've shared, that how much you've accomplished, which is why it was so important for me to kind of relay that to my audience, because this is not somebody that I'm bringing onto my show that's just talking and recommending products or saying something. This is a magnificent story of healing, and this is a time where we can all learn from each other and from stories like this, because there is you've really helped yourself.
There's hope, and I want to just touch upon what you just said to me is so accurate. It's a lonely feeling, and it's hard for people to understand that, because I think people see a person, and I mean, you're a beautiful human being. So I'm sure when people meet you, they can tell you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're kind. And then when that happens, there's this misconception that everything's going right for that person. But on the inside, if you've got spiral sheets and parasites and fungus and things in your body, and your brain feels like it's locked in a box, it's really hard to be happy and not feel lonely, right?
100%.
And that was, and it's hard to talk to anyone, because one of the things I learned through that is people just don't want to hear it, right? They see this person that's a light to them, or someone that looks happy, and they think, why isn't this person, what's wrong? And if you say, I feel horrible, like my joints hurt, I can't think, I'm so tired, there's a misunderstanding. And you will be one of the few people that understand what I'm getting ready to say, because I think most people don't believe this, and this is the truth. Mm-hmm. I made a product, like I met Clayton, who runs Root, and I made a product that I had worked on in different ways throughout years, because through that journey, of course, working for pharmaceutical, I was also exposed to a lot of major scientists, top scientists, Nobel Peace Prize winners, going to Harvard or Cornell, same thing in the world. So I got this education, and I kept working on what can we do to get rid of Lyme disease, because in my heart, I kept thinking, it's still inside of me, because it's kind of like cancer. It's there, right? How do I get rid of it? But I was John Sally, who's a basketball player, introduced me to Clayton, and they needed me to work on this project that would help basketball, NBA, and NFL players with like their joints to help repair it. And it was a Zeolite project. And I remember not having the time to do it, but as I started reading more and more, and I'd researched it before, thinking, I really think this is the answer, and I think I need to be on this project. I was the CEO of a healthcare company at the time. And I remember thinking, I will do this project and if it will make me better and make sure that my kids are better, because I'm one of the scientists that go against what a lot of doctors think. I think that you can pass on Lyme disease. I think you can transmit it sexually. A lot of doctors will not admit to that. And I really wanted answers. Yeah, most doctors do not agree with me at all on that. And of course, my comment always is, well, why can't you give blood when you have Lyme disease? But that's another longer conversation the two of us can have, and then maybe do another podcast. Because I worked on HIV. You can't give. I don't have HIV. I worked for a company that we worked on it. I was a scientist, Bristol Myers Squibb. You can't give blood if you have HIV, right? But I don't know if people know this. You can't give blood if you have Lyme disease. You're not supposed to. They recently came up with something that's supposed to clean that blood, but if it's not contagious, then why does it matter? And there's different arguments I could have with other scientists on this, but I have a lot of education, and I think that Lyme disease is a lot has a lot more issues than people are willing to admit, is how I'll say it, or that doctors are willing to admit.
100%. It was only until that I went to Mexico in September, because obviously I couldn't come straight here to the United States via the UK. So I had to travel for 2 weeks via Mexico. And while I was there, I got those bullseye bites again, mosquito bites. And then I started like in certain parts of my legs. And I recall getting this as a child. And I remember getting sick after one, but it was just, oh, she's just been bitten. But
Yeah.
nothing seriously was sort of taken. I hadn't even heard of it, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I would get like these, so it was very progressive, may not have been so fatal at the start, may have been mild. I don't know how many different levels to this is, because you seemed like you got it really bad. So
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't in hospital or anything immediately, but I just remember the change and the shift after the age of 7, and in my overall well-being. And I also was 2 months premature as well. Like I was only short of just under 4 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, like almost three and a half, I think. My mum said I was the size. My mum's and my hand's
Yeah.
the same size. She goes, you're the size of that. She had to be in an incubator for 22 days, which was interesting. So, there was a lot of things that can add up to this story of my well-being as well as yours. But it was around sort of in my teens that I realized I was developing some form of like ADHD. I couldn't focus and couldn't remember, but I pretended I was okay because my society, my community kind of demanded that you have to be okay, and my own personal circumstances and the things that I'd experienced growing up as a child, that was the case. So Lyme's disease and fibromyalgia, oh, there's always something wrong with you. There's always something wrong with you, and you're kind of shunned off, and even by the doctors. And then you've just got depression because of XYZ that you've experienced in life. So not only did I experience XYZ in life, but I was actually aching all the time, and I was in pain and that sort
Yeah.
of brain fog. So, having gone through that yourself and trying and achieving everything that you've achieved, that's where I think, wow, like, because I couldn't ever focus. And even to the extent of like a lot of my audience are wondering where I am at the moment. And that's why it's just some days I feel good, some days I don't. And it's got progressively worse in the last 6 months, although I'm back on an upwards journey, because I did this blood cleaning treatment, the oxygenation blood. I don't know if you've heard of that. So
Yeah, I have.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, I felt okay, a little bit okay after
Yeah.
that. Wasn't so bad.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna tell you. You'll understand this, but I think most people don't, especially business people and people that are about just, the power and the money, because life's not just about that, right?
Yeah.
But we live in this society, and that's how we are, that's our world, like what our structure is. And I made the formula, that one of the formulas is at Clean Slate, years ago. Now, I went back to school for 3 years and then another year at Cornell. I went to Harvard to learn how to make particular products better, but especially because of that one, because I've had Lyme disease, and I did not make any money off that. In fact, to date, at Root, I actually am the formulator, but for that product, I have not received royalties or been paid for that. And if you said to me, that doesn't make sense. Well, I even worked for another company that did not have nearly as good of products as Root, but I helped them with some of their formulations. They would not let me do all the formulations I wanted to do because it was so expensive, because it's expensive to do certain ways to manufacture products. From my perspective, it was not about money for that product. It was, or for any product for that matter. I do have a living. I do this as a scientist, but for that product, for Clean Slate, which is at, Root, I wanted to have that for me and my family. I understood that particular product could help with anything from autoimmune to cancer, but I also understood I couldn't make claims on that.
Okay.
So for me, it was just cleaner if I just didn't, and I think that's really hard for people to accept. But if you've been sick, like I've been sick, and you have family members that have been sick from different things like Lyme disease or cancer, you would understand that, right? Because when you reach a point where you don't want to live because you're so sick, then you start realizing what's important. You start and then when you feel like there's not really anyone to talk to, you know, because you feel like if you talk that you don't, I'm sure you're like me, you don't want to spend all day complaining, but yet there's
Exactly.
days you wake up that you can't think and you need
Yeah.
someone to understand how you're feeling,
Yeah.
right? And I personally think that, so the journey for me, just so you know, when I started really getting better with Lyme disease, this is probably going to drive you crazy, but I'm just letting you know, it took from that point when I was 19. So, you know, 25 years, I mean, it was in 2015, when I started actually taking a product that I'd worked on to help me get better. And then I had to learn how to dose it because, you know, nutraceuticals are not like pharmaceuticals. When we're at a pharmaceutical agency and our company, we do all kinds of testing and we know how to dose. But even then, what people don't get and don't really realize is there's no way for a pharmaceutical company to give you all the dosing per person's DNA and all their blood, right? So they give this window of what you're supposed to take, hoping that it will work for most people, oftentimes not telling you about all the side effects that can go along with it.
Yeah.
And with this nutraceutical, I would never advise this with anyone else, but I mean, I shared with you a little bit before the show, I've taken like 3 times more than we recommend for other people to take, because I realized one day that when I went through the process of really working on, you know, getting rid of the Lyme disease and getting my body a lot healthier than it had ever been, that I was slowly getting better, but it was really hard. It was like I'd have good days and bad days. So I reached a point where I'm like, I'm just done. I'm going to drink half a bottle, right? Which I would never tell people to do.
Yeah.
But I did. And I realized through that some people, that their bodies are extremely sick and they have this in their bodies, to get over that level, they have to take a lot of this particular product, right? However, the problem is if you've got someone's body that has Lyme disease and it's gone past Lyme disease goes past the brain barrier. I'm sure you know that, which is one of the reasons there's all these issues. And then the neurotransmitters actually can take that signaling and it can grow throughout the body. And so I really think most people that have Lyme disease, if they want to get better, they've really got to understand and commit to the fact that it is a process. It does take time, but they can get there and they can't give up. And I would say one of the biggest reasons, if not the major reason I do what I do, is because of the fact that, not just because of my children and I want them to be okay, or my parents or my family and friends, but for me personally, like I want to live, and I want to live a life where I'm happy and I can be me and remember who I am. And Lyme disease takes a little bit of that from people. And I think people don't want to admit that, but it's true.
It does. I felt for a while that it was robbing me of my soul. So to speak. I couldn't even function to a point where it started around July this year, where it got really progressively worse. So when they diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, I actually didn't even like talking about it on any of my podcasts, because from March last year, it was sort of gung-ho, about this movement, with what's going on in the world. We must, really show up, fight for humanity and do what we've got to do. And I was volunteering every day during lockdown in the UK for 2 months. I would come home and I'd get tired, but not the exhaustion that I have felt in the last 6 months acutely. And there's so many layers to this as well, the sort of psychological side, the physical side, and then there's also the spiritual side as well. And I'm sort of collective with my approach with everything that I do. So, if we just focus on the physical body, but without looking at what nutrition we need, then it's futile. But what works for me may not work for you. What works for somebody else, we've got to really look at an individual and see, right, well, this is working. So I can do this show today because it's been about 4-5, started to be, just over 5 weeks that I've been taking Zero In, where I've actually started feeling, it's almost like this fog that gets lifted over your eyes and then here. So that's where I sort of was feeling the cloudiness, and I could barely function on a day-to-day basis. So I was I started taking that, and then I'm doing, like, obviously the clean water and doing what I can. I take the CLEANSLATE now, but there's so many layers to this. But just going on what you said about how this can make literally you feel like you're just a person that enjoys life, but it robs you of the basics. And I have really no complaints at all. You know, I'm sad about what's going on in humanity at the moment, but and I still want to fight fearlessly. And this come in and like, all right, we're going to stop you from your fight and your gob and stop you from talking.
No, and that can't happen. And you know, it's so funny you say that, because I thought that the other day. I was thinking, you know, it's like someone sprayed something in the air
Yeah.
where everyone's getting sick in the last, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. And I was thinking, well, I don't think I understand with when you have viruses or even any kind of spike proteins that are communicating, right, and different things in the body that are also in the air. And I did a talk about this the other day to some doctors, where everyone understands that there's this virus is in the air, right? Whether it was man-made or not. For me, I always say this, it doesn't matter to me, because what I do understand is that we have to deal with it and fight it and live our lives. So in order for you to fight the fight, you need to fight. And me to do that, to stand up, we've got to be okay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that I know when you have a virus, especially if it's airborne, and you're going to have fungus that proliferates not just in the body, but in the environment, right? It's going to grow like black mold and different things, which are horrible for people that have fibromyalgia or Lyme disease. Because just so everyone understands, a spiral sheet, when I think of spiral sheets, I think of parasites. Parasites grow in fungus, right? And I understand that there's a difference, but I also understand there's a lot of similarities. Yeah. And so when you have something that is released or that's growing, and it will only make something like Lyme disease worse, right? And another thing is, when you look at this particular virus, you know, COVID looks like a crown. If you look at it under a microscope, it's been around since like the 1600s. It's everyone, you know, it's had all these different variants, but this particular COVID-19 and all the different variants with that, if you look at that, there's some similarities to what you look at in a lab with Lyme disease or even HIV. It's really bizarre to me. And so I think that for those people that have Lyme disease, this has been an extremely trying time, and people with fibromyalgia, because it's just exasperating it, right? So you have to focus on yourself. You are doing the right thing. You have to.
I did think that, because it was around July, the first week of July. I'd just come off a protest in the UK, and there was about 2 million people. It was amazing. I went to the ones right from the beginning when there was 50 at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, and then it just grew and grew every month. There were these protests, and, you know, to raise awareness of what's going on, etc. And I distinctly remember that it was after that protest, I was around a lot of energies, and of course, I'm sure there was something at play that day, because a lot of people started feeling sick after that particular one. So yeah, I do think there's something that has been sprinkled in the air worldwide, and people, because it kind of supports the narrative that people are getting sick. Yeah, people are getting sick from this new variant. Now it's the Omicron, or there's the COVID itself, and you know that's why everybody needs to get the, you know, sorry, I just have to be coded with that. So for my show. So, and that's why everyone needs to get that. And that's why everyone's falling sick. So, you know, even if you haven't had it and you're falling sick, see, it's because you've caught the virus. But mine's nothing like that. Nothing like that. I haven't been ill on that level, like flu or even anything like that. Mine's just fatigue and brain fog. And that fatigue is horrendous. So there's a difference. So, you know, people say, oh, look at you, you haven't had that. Maybe you should, maybe you'll start feeling better. Absolutely nonsense. No.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. And well, first of all, I personally believe when you give yourself, like I've had more vaccinations probably than anyone I know, because of all the travel I've had to do to all the Middle Eastern and Asia, you know, Asian and Africa, South Africa, like all those countries, because they wouldn't let me in. And then at one point, this sounds bizarre, but this really happened to me. I lost my passport vaccine card, and I couldn't go to Nigeria unless I redid everything, because they wouldn't let me in, and it was not on the computer. They could not pull it out. And Clay was so upset with me, and I just sat and drank the, you know, the clean slate version that I had done. Now clean slate's much stronger, and I added additional things to make it better. But I just sat and drank it, but I was still sick. I mean, really sick for 6 weeks, and who knows what long-term effects. Now, that was not the current one that's going around, but just what we all have had to do. And if you traveled other countries, that's what had to happen. So when all of this happened with what's going on now, I, of course, would always make a choice. If I don't have to get another one, I won't. But because I had also understood the delivery system, especially with someone like me with Lyme disease and who's had cancer and different things, I just know I'm not a candidate that's really a good candidate to do that, right? And for you, you're gonna have to be extremely careful because you already have all this going on in your body. So to give your body something else for it to fight and to make it worse, or to exasperate it is not a good idea, in my opinion. But I mean, and there's a lot of people that would disagree with me.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm just, I've done my research on this. And yeah, I've had the BCG when I was young, the rubella, that would have, contributed to it. And then I think my last shot would have been when I was my mid-20s for flying to India, tetanus.
Yeah.
The tetanus shot. And that's it. That's where it stopped. So that wouldn't have helped at all. That hasn't helped any of us. I mean, there's so many studies to show the correlation between earlier vaccines and autism.
Yeah.
And this is just from stuff that I've read. And just to make a disclaimer here, I'm not giving any medical advice or anything as such. We're just having a discussion. So YouTube.
Yeah, no, I say this on every talk. So, you won't hear me do a discussion, even with doctors, unless I say, I am not claiming anything. I'm not claiming to cure things. And I'm also not claiming, I'm sorry, that keeps happening with my phone. I'm not claiming that. And I'm also not claiming to, cure anything or fix anything or to tell people what to do. But what I will say is this: people have the right to know both sides of everything and then to make an educated opinion. And for us to think we don't, or for governments and people to take that away, is extremely frustrating to me. I spent so many years with Lyme disease, which for me, I reached a point at one point, I didn't even want to talk about it because it was such an issue for me, especially the first 4 to 5 years after I had it. I would say the first year was the worst. The second year wasn't much better. I mean, I had to relearn how to think and relearn how to even pass my classes in college. So I went from being a 4.0 student, perfect straight A's, to not being able to answer a science or a math question. And not remembering the English. And English was something that just came naturally to me. But it's the oddest thing. My brain stepped in at one point, and it's really odd. I may not be able to figure out how to write or figure out an answer to a question, but I just know the answer. And so people will say, well, how did you get to that answer? I don't know. And I did this one project where they brought in all these CPAs and all these accountants to financially create this algorithm and to come up with these numbers on a merger and acquisition and to look at everything. And I just said, here's going to be the number. And by looking at all the data, and they were like, how do you know that? I go, well, that's what I just know. And they took, like I said, all those months we spent, not $1 million, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was the exact answer I had. And if you said to me, how did you know that? My answer, I have no idea. I was going to say, I have no idea, but I know this. I know that either my brain figured out another way to compromise, to figure that out. It was in there locked away, right? You know how you say you have the brain fog, but really that information's still there, or divine intervention, or maybe a combination of both.
Exactly. And that's not to sort of discard your kind of perfect brain that you have. When it's compromised, it's debilitating. You feel like, oh my God, like I used to be able to, know this and articulate myself so well, and suddenly it just gets zapped. But then when you have a situation like that, which used to happen to me a lot in my podcast, suddenly I would just be, something would happen and I'd be able to flow. Whereas in just a few hours before, I wouldn't even be able to remember what I ate for breakfast, for example. And I truly believe we've been robbed and desensitized of our spiritual powers. and our
Oh,
spiritual
yeah.
God gifts that we have, that intuitive compass, which is what I allow to lead me. And when you say, I just know, sometimes my friends go, "Oh, you're just so like such a egotistical person. I just know." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm being really humble about this. This is an intuitive led
Yeah.
answer. So I'm not 100% sure, but I just know I've got this feeling." And
Yeah.
usually 9 times out of 10, it's right. But we're taught not to trust ourselves.
Absolutely.
We're taught to
Yeah.
outsource our thinking to academia and the,
Oh, yeah.
sort of, the academic fraternities and outside ourselves, because a book said it, because an establishment said it, because of the accreditations that go with it. So then, when we
Which are
are,
really irrelevant. Not to stop you, because I've been in so many
yeah,
colleges and like people, when I started really standing up, people started attacking my education and I don't want us to get off this topic, but I want to tell you this is a combination of, I went to Murray State University, Southwest
yeah,
Baptist, I went to South Alabama, I went to Argosy, University of Sarasota, then Harvard, then Cornell, then Charter, which was online, which was basically nothing. And then I got attacked because one of those schools was not accredited. But I just was going to tell you this. If you ask me, where did I learn the information? I learned from people that I met at those locations. And just so everyone knows, Harvard and Cornell are amazing universities, but the issue is when you learn something or write a paper at those universities, they get your ideas, they have your information, and then it's passed on. That's how science, that's how information works. The concept that you can't learn outside of that, or that you can't be as intelligent by looking into it without all those degrees, is ridiculous. And that's speaking from someone like me that kept going to school. I just really want people to understand that it doesn't take a stamp from a bunch of people that are in getting paid to say you're smart or that you're more educated. It also doesn't take a stamp from someone to say you're going to go to heaven or you're better than someone in a religion, right?
yeah,
Like I'm so glad you brought that up, because I agree. Our spirituality is inside of this, and we don't listen to this. Instead, we listen to all of these outside structures, right, that are making money off of us being a part of it, instead of us trusting who we are inside. And if I could give the gift to anyone, and maybe one of the gifts you and I have been given is that through Lyme disease and through
yeah.
our illnesses, we learn to trust this. We may not remember it. Like sometimes I can't remember a simple word like boat. It's bizarre. People don't know that
Me
about
too.
me.
Me
I
too.
mean, is it crazy? Like this morning, I said something about, well, we'll do that on Thanksgiving. And someone in the office goes, what? I go, we'll do that on Thanksgiving. And they said, do you mean New Year's? And I go, yeah, I do it all the time.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
always say, I'm sorry. I switch up words because I'm like you. I've learned to cover that, right? Because you learn. So maybe you and I, one of the gifts we've been given is to finally trust, because I can tell you, I'm like you. 99% of the time, if I know and I don't understand why I know, it's right. And I'm not being arrogant either, right?
yeah.
Like when I do something scientifically, I don't always know, but there's this gut feeling I get. And maybe this is what you and I need to start focusing on and maybe do something together about, because I don't think people understand. Just trust that, right? You don't
100%.
have to, yeah, you just can trust it.
Yeah,
Really.
but which is why I wanted to reinforce from the start as well, because we've been sort of dumbed down or numbed down as humanity to not think for ourselves and only think via books. But you have had both sides. So your condition, or the Lyme's, the dis-ease that Lyme caused you, and sort of our whole physiology and our mental state, and then our psychological state, it actually served as a catalyst for you to do more, because there was this inner knowing which we are all gifted. We are all gifted, but they're robbing us
All of
from
us.
birth. Yeah, they're robbing us from just needling us from birth and just taking us our God-given immunity. Yeah, and the ability as humans just to survive and thrive on this planet. And we are like not taught the right way. We're taught things in a regimented way, and essentially his stories. Yeah, they're never, well, his or her story, then like we're told that's what exactly happened. And if we look at what's happening today, and then we have our grandchildren asking us, what happened, yeah, it's going to be our story, but we're going to have, but then there's
Yeah.
someone who's been jacked, it's going to be their story, right? So we have to sort of like open our eyes and lenses to looking at things as a collective, Although we're all in
Oh
this
yeah.
together, everyone has different levels of perception. Yeah, their perception, and also what is your intention in this movement. So for example, I've woken up just like so many millions of people across the world, and I had no confidence because of this condition. I never talked about it, but people would look at me and think, oh my God, Alpa, you're so confident. I'm very confident, and I have that gift in the sense where sometimes when I talk and I go into this spiritual side, the wisdom comes out and it's I'm like a 90-year-old like old lady speaking, or like a 3-year-old child sometimes. But this is something that I realized is because I've shut myself off from outside noise. And I only realized that in this movement. And what do I mean by outside noise? I switched off the news 10 years ago. I stopped reading papers, and I actually started feeling really sad at what I was feeling, and I just thought it was my condition that was just making me like not want to watch anything and not have the attention span to deal with things. But in that, I started listening to a lot of spiritual stuff, and so for 10 years, it kind of strengthened that for me, so that when for someone who couldn't even talk on Facebook, didn't like sharing anything on Facebook or social media, but the odd post here and there when I went out, to then screaming about what I'd learned in when I went down the rabbit hole. And then all the things that we were saying in March, April, May last year, we were in those situations. And this is something I'd like to hear your thoughts on, Dr. Cristina, is that, where we are going with the Jabberwockies, as I call them, the Jabberwockies, you know, it's gone further than I'd actually expected it to, yeah, last year. And there's this growing concern as every day goes by that, oh my God, like every single day I'm hearing about some kind of injury as a result of it. Where do you think we're going with this? Just a view.
Yeah, I think that we I, I think that we have a lot now for like a lot of issues that will keep occurring in people that probably will never be related back to that, because the issue is even before, like when all of this, I'm sure you've seen or I don't know if you've heard of the show Baxed, which goes in, which Del Bigtree did.
Yeah.
And I was at brunch with Dale the other day, and it's interesting. One of the problems is that you've got these. So first of all, medical doctors are trained in medical school, and this is a very difficult conversation. I'm going to be very careful because I have a niece and nephew that are doctors, and they're trained by the pharmaceutical. So for example, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I would do some of that, right? I would do speaking, I would go in, do resident training, train for the doctors. The funding for research comes from pharmaceutical biotech. The funding for television comes from pharmaceutical and biotech. And there's great things pharmaceutical and biotech do, right? And I really want to go on record and say that. I said that to Dell. I said, there's two sides to this story. There's companies that do things that have really progressed our lives, that have helped us, that if we didn't have certain antibiotics, we didn't have certain antifungals, people would have died, right? Like when you give birth, if certain complications happen, like you
100%.
went into the ICU for 22 days, I was the same way. I was premature. So I'm very thankful for that. But the issue is, the problem is there's a point. There's a point where, okay, here's the reality. And then here's how we can communicate that reality, and then people get the right to make a personal choice. But when the narrative is just around people are going to get something done that's supposed to save them and help them, and we're all celebrating and even giving them money for doing it, it is not a problem to pay someone $50 when a company is making thousands of dollars off that one thing, right? Or
Millions.
I mean, I'll be very candid. I worked on products that were, $500,000 a year per patient, $800,000 a year, and great companies, but it was just very expensive to make. But also those companies had to make money, right? And so it was very expensive for people to buy it. With this situation, we released something during the first phase of a pandemic that then we didn't know the repercussions. We did know in the 80s, right, when this certain technology was being utilized, what it did to animals, for example. And I'm one of the scientists that loved that delivery system. Like, I really loved the way it would work. But the issue is this: if you see it, and I always say this, if you see a beautiful woman and someone is like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful, then a guy dates her, or a female dates her, or whatever, they're together. The issue is this: if she's crazy and she's going to cheat on him or kill him, who cares if she's beautiful, right? Same thing. Who cares? I say this, I have 3 sons and a daughter. I say this to my sons all the time. So if you give someone something that, yeah, it can help them, but in the end, it does those things, makes them crazy or kills them or makes them have a heart attack or something like that, which I'm not saying it does that. I'm saying that we've had a lot of issues like that as it pertains to this in particularly. Is it worth it? No, right? And absolutely. If you're experimenting to see if it's worth it, I personally don't believe it was that much of an experiment. Like, I personally believe there's a reason all this is rolled out. I don't have the answers. I don't run the governments. I don't run, I'm not the most powerful person in the world. I am, though, a person that's been exposed to a lot of those high levels, probably like you, in a lot of those environments. And I've been in the boardrooms when we've made tough decisions that usually at the end of the day had to do with money. And it really saddens me because I don't think that it will be written about in the textbooks adequately for maybe, 30 years to 100 years from now, if then, because I think that how do you apologize for something like that to a mass population, to everyone? And then it's easier to make people think that the people that aren't going along with the narrative are crazy or bad or not smart or not as educated or, whatever you decide. And that's what I was going to tell you. That's another thing. I love what you're doing to get the message out, because spiritually, if people can start understanding, they own their bodies. It's theirs. They are in charge of it, and they've got to take the power back. They've got to listen to their spiritual self, to their soul, and to what's inside of them, rather than listening to someone else that read a book, or someone else that was told something. And, I'll say it again. I've driven a lot of different cars. You probably have too. I can take a car to just a standard mechanic that learned from a book and he says it can't be fixed, and then I can take it to a specialist that looks at everything and really is honest with me and is able to fix it, because he doesn't just listen to a book or read a book. And so people have got to understand they are the smartest person about their body. They do need to listen to their intuition. They do need to understand that, yes, this is something people are getting and they can choose to get it. But again, I would love for you to use that analogy later. I think this is the first time I've ever said this to anyone outside of my family. But again, it's like a man dating a crazy woman and marrying her, and she tells me, okay, she's beautiful. Who cares that she's beautiful? I can't even tell you how many guy friends and my sons that I say that to, but if we could apply that knowledge and understanding, because you understand that right away, and I do, and we know that men do, right? So absolutely. If we can just share that and have people look into it. And I don't want people to feel discouraged or upset because they've had this done, like they decided to get what the government told them they had to for work. There's different things you can do. And one of those is to be able to use certain products and certain things that can help them get rid of the things that are in their body and support it. And I think a lot of that is spiritual too. I think your mission to let people know that spiritually, I just read a classified paper that had been released a couple of years ago from the military about how we're holograms and we're particles. And somebody asked me what I thought about that. And I said, it's actually not that crazy. It blows your mind when you read it, but it's actually scientifically not that crazy, because in our eyes, we see what we perceive based on our knowledge from our brain, right? 100%. The cortex, the hypothalamus. So what we really are is a combination of particles and energy. So we're a shell, but inside of us is our soul and our spirit, right? People have got to start looking at that, and they've got to trust who that is and what's saying that to them, because what's inside, which is your spirit, your soul, your spirituality, is what's going to keep you alive and keep you going. So you've got to listen to that more than you listen to a television. That's what I'm going to say. Or 100%. Or someone making money.
That was
Yeah.
very, see, for my cousins who have always been, for example, like follow the science, because I was met with a lot of um, animosity and resistance and cognitive dissonance from my family and close friends who all happen to be doctors or, IT specialists or barristers and lawyers, and, followed the academic route. I've always looked up to these people, and it's everyone has gone for it. And then I'm looking like the crazy one because I was always different and I was always questioning things anyway.
Yeah.
But that's fine, and I can accept that, and I can stand up to that adversity. That really doesn't matter to me what people think and how their opinions of me is tainted now because of this, because their life matters to me. So I keep shouting and I keep speaking. I haven't stopped, even though I'm exhausted. And I have my rants. I have my rants where I go, what the hell is this? Humanity, wake the fuck up. I
I
have
do
these
too, just so you know.
I have these crazy, and Nick always says, oh God, here we go, Alparan. Oh my God, the keyboard is like snapping and she's going like this on there. Oh my God, baby, what are you writing? What are you writing? I'm getting Alparan. Calm down, breathe, breathe. Because I feel so upset, and I, use profanities here and there. Sorry if any of my family sees that. It's like, wake the fuck up, right? I can't, and I go crazy, and I think it's just the limes. It's just the limes. It's a bit of, bit of anger in. But don't blame my limes. This is not easy to have limes in this day and age. Don't know how I feel. But yeah,
You
it is
can say the
crazy.
spiral sheets are talking. It's not me.
It's not me. It's just it's the little goblins. It's the parasites inside. They're a bit angry today. But going
Yeah.
on, like, about the Atman, the soul, come from the Vedic background, and I really thank my parents and my grandparents from me just as a young child observing them in what they do, and they could never answer questions to me because I would ask them all the time. They used to call me question mark in India, and they
My
couldn't
mother
answer.
did too. Yeah.
It's just because I
They
said
couldn't
so.
answer it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I really
That's what
thank them for that because it made me more curious and more nosier and curious about, like, yeah, okay, well, you haven't answered that, so I'm not going to do that just because you told me so. I was very defiant. Spiritually, my life path number is a 1, and I'm such number 1 where, I want to know what's behind everything that, I'm learning. When I was young, now some will just help if I can remember it, but it's about reclaiming our sovereignty as spiritual beings. Yes, it's amazing the wealth of knowledge we can learn from the outside, but what we haven't been taught is, like, just how to breathe correctly. That should be, instead of some of the sports that we do at school, it's just every day should start off. I was interviewed about 4 years ago when I was in the financial services. So what if you were prime minister, what would you change? I'd say I would introduce, in the education system, I'd introduce yoga and meditation to start a child's day first thing in the morning, or correct breathing at least. And I think that,
Absolutely. It
yeah.
takes years to learn that. You know that. So you need to start people when they're younger. I 100% agree. And none of us are taught that, or I wasn't taught that growing up
Yeah.
in any of my education.
Yeah. And we're not, so, like, we could have it so many shows and stuff about all the things we're speaking about, but just sort of wrapping up, it's just been amazing speaking to you, and I could go on and on, and your story is so inspiring, and it's given me courage as well, and inspiration, because I have good days, bad days, in as much as you do. It's not an easy journey going through this, but there are things that we can do to help ourselves. I've researched so many different products. I've tried them. Some are good, but I do find that Catherine Edwards, beautiful friend of mine, she talks about how great it has been for her animal friends, right? So she uses it, she recommends it to vets and for animals as well. So it's really nice hearing her feedback. And I have a few people that I have actually started using it and noticing a difference. So, I've tried other products. They haven't been bad. They haven't, but I've noticed, it's about noticing the difference, and zero in is starting to kick in. I don't make any claims to say that, I'm being cured, because when I went to get the blood cleaning treatment, it's called the extracorporeal oxygen therapy, I think, or something like that. I got it done just about a week ago, and it's like, it was really interesting to see the blood coming out and then the red blood going back in. So I felt an immediate kind of lightness. But they said you probably would need about 4 or 5, and of course they're quite expensive. But I'm getting that. But your journey's just yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing it with us. And there's so much more. I'd love to have you again on my show. But just to sort of wrap up, we were saying something, and I've just lost my train of thought.
I don't know, but I want to have you on my show too. I have a list, and I was sitting here and I put your name at the top of it, Alva. So I really would love to, because I actually it's hard for me to connect with people. I really care about people when I meet them, but I have had a different kind of journey, and I've been exposed to a lot, all throughout the world. So, talking to you, I feel less lonely, because you've had such a similar experience as me. And I do want to say this: you are dealing with this now. I have a lot of certainty that, I can't tell you how that's going to happen, how you're going to get there, but I think that you will get better within the next year. And I think you will keep getting better, just like I kind of got better. And I will continue to share with you, outside of this, just different things that have helped me. And then please share with me as well. But I will tell you, I do feel that I am really back to who I am, and I'm much healthier. I do think that it's still a continuous journey. I say this to people all the time: your health and wellness do not end in a week. It's every day of the year, because it's the most important part. You have probably had, in many ways, an amazing life that everyone respects and admires. And I addressed that in the beginning. You're beautiful, you're intelligent, you've done all these things, but you could have the most beautiful house in the world. If your body's not healthy, it won't matter. You could be invited to the most famous parties in the world, right? And I think that's why, for me, I've been exposed to a lot, but I understand what's important, because I need to be healthy and here and around the right people in order to have a good life. And I just think you're going to be amazing. You already are.
Thank
And
you.
it's, maybe this happened so you could share this with everyone, because you weren't
I
on
do.
social media, and you probably need to be. Yeah.
I do. I mean, we get misunderstood on this journey. And when you just said that, I got a little bit of chills on my left-hand side, because this is a collective sort of effort on my part with my healing journey. It's progressive, and it's every day, and it's with that intention of I want to mentally be well as well, because this takes a toll on how you energetically feel with everything. And it's not being a victim. You have a victim mentality. But what you just said there, which gave me the chills, is that I know within 1 year. Now that's something that I get guided by the angels or by my guides. And when you say something like that, it's very connected to this healer that I see. And she said exactly the same thing. And she said that it is very it's very important that you go through all of these things to actually discover what truly is going on internally. And 2021 is going to be that year. Just quickly, briefly share why I said that, because I went to see her in February 2020. And she was very highly recommended by a friend of mine, and she's like an alternative healer. So she does a lot of different modalities, Reiki and all that kind of stuff, but she's very intuitive and gifted. So she goes up to you. If you call her a psychic, she'll beat you. But she's a healer, and she heals with her hands, and she just can channel information from feeling by bioscanning your body, just from the gift of her hand. She's had it since she was a child. And it was just so interesting when you said what you said. You almost morphed into her there, and it was her speaking to me. And I was like, oh my God. And it's exactly what she said to me. Now, when you say, I just know, everyone watching this, I just want everyone to sort of close their eyes and take a few deep breaths and really connect with themselves, and really realize that ourselves are our greatest gift. We are so powerful individually as spirits and beings in this world that we don't need to outsource anything to anyone. And the healing journey is an everyday process. We're healing on so many different levels, not just physically, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, from traumas that we don't even have the energy sometimes to speak about, or the courage to speak about with others. But just taking that first step, for self. And that doesn't mean you have to set up channels or you have to do this on social media, because that carries different sort of energies. But just know within yourself that you are your own guiding light, and you will find the way if you connect to God every day. And that's what I say to everybody. Every
I
single
love
day.
that.
Every single day, that's my medicine, is connecting to God. Show me what I need to do. Show me,
That's mine.
show me what
My
I need to do. Show me where I'm going wrong. Show me where my ego is coming in play. And
Yeah.
that starts getting the brain fog. But I'm also doing things where, okay, I'm sorting the spiritual side. I need to sort out with the right supplements. So everyone, I'll have the details for Roots. I truly mean it. It's a phenomenal. I love Restore. I really love Restore. I take 4 a day. I have to
Yeah,
take.
I love Restore
It's
too.
like my
I have one of my very best friends that takes 5 a day,
Yeah.
and then another one that takes 4, and I usually take 3 to 4. I did not have all of it on our ski trip because all my kids were taking it, and I did not do as well. And so like Ted Baker's in here with me. I'm like, please go get me a Restore. He's probably
Yeah.
going to get me one because
Oh, he's there. Tell him I said hi.
he was sitting here because we're trying to get a bunch of stuff done. Everyone always thinks that during this time I take a break, but actually this is one of our busiest times
Awesome.
of the year. But I've really enjoyed
Me
this.
too.
I really have. I want you to know that, and I'm going to
Yeah.
stay in touch with you. And I expect you to be on. See, he just brought me one. Come say
Yay.
hi. He's had. I don't know if he'll do that for me.
Hi,
Hi, how do you do?
Ted.
Yeah.
Hello.
How
Hey.
Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure.
She knows you.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
We've
Yeah,
been,
she knows.
yeah, we've been on emails, but
Alpa,
Yeah,
you're
it's Alba,
right.
yeah.
I apologize. I have too many things going on. It's a pleasure to see your face. I've never met you in person before, so it's a pleasure.
nice to meet you. And my
How
audience
are you?
will see how lovely you are.
He's awesome. He's really awesome.
So
But
everyone that's watched this today, thank you very much for tuning in. Dr. Cristina, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to having you on the Love in Action show again very soon.
thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. I appreciate